Look, everybody, I've got one too. I wanted to share a couple little things I encountered that may be a problem for you. You may have that problem with yours, but I just wanted to run over a couple of things. So this is what you see. I'm not going to do unboxing or show you features because everybody else's video has done that. I've just got power, keyboard, and video connected at the moment, so it will go around and it will complain about the adapter failure. So the first thing you're going to see, obvious, that I've done is I've put a ZIF socket in, although it's the wrong size. I've got a 28 pin one on the way. This one's 32. And I've done a couple other things. So one thing I did, because I wanted to be able to work on the ROM and I didn't have the ZIF socket yet, so I couldn't, get it in and out, was I wanted to be able to pull the board up and sort of set it on something higher. And anyway, I had trouble with, let me turn this off. I had trouble with this particular cable here. Let's get your view on that a little better. So this is the cable that goes to the LEDs. It's soldered in on both sides, which is not great. So pretty simple mod. I just put in a like a DuPont style connector on there so that I can remove that when I want to lift out the board for any reason. So that was pretty straightforward. That way you don't have to sort of navigate the LED board out every time and risk breaking it. So a couple other things I've learned. You can run it without these two wires that go over here, this RF stuff connected. It doesn't matter at all. So I normally leave those unplugged, especially when I have been running this with it elevated slightly. The next thing is in the power supply itself. So when I got mine, I sort of ran over and looked everything up, wanted to go sure, make sure there's no bad caps or whatnot. Well, that would include the power supply. And so let me unplug this real quick. All right. So open it up. There's just two screws here. And there's no refas in there, which is good. And so at this stage, I hadn't even powered it on, and I'm just inspecting. And the first power on I actually did with this cover off. Okay. So let's see if you can see that a little better. Yeah, all the caps in there are fine, and there's no refas. And I haven't had any reports of anybody having an issue with the cap. But I did have a different issue. When I turned it on, I heard this. But as you can see, that's not what it's doing now. The fan, even though both the housing and the blades are both presumably cast aluminum, I believe, and there was no evidence of any torquing or anything in the box at all, the fan was scraping the sides, and so it made this horrible noise, which I played in that other clip. And so I disassembled this power supply. There's like 4 screws to lift the power supply up. Some of the cables are a bit short. I'm not going to take it back off right now because I think I can verbally explain it well enough. But as I lifted that up, I actually went ahead and extended the cable, the wire, with some shrink wrap and whatnot that goes to the fan so that I could get the fan out again if I needed to, just kind of out in this position to look at. So what I ended up doing was starting by just trying to get some sandpaper in there and sand around the metal, and I just couldn't progress it enough to get it clear. So I ended up actually disassembling the fan itself. You can remove, I think there's one screw on the back of this spindle here, and this just lifts off. It'll just come out if there's enough slack on the wires. It'll just come out, and then I sanded on and actually used a little bit of filing and tried to be real consistent with the number of strokes on each blade, so I didn't cause any out of balance, and then smoothed up the edges, and also kind of went after this housing a little bit more with some sandpaper again, trying to be consistent around the edges. Put it back together, and as you can see, it's nice and quiet now. So that's something to watch out for. Another thing is, I know that at least 2 of these have had this problem. I was talking to to John over at John's Basement, and I told him how quiet my fan was after I fixed it, and he said that, yeah, his was pretty quiet. He was surprised something like this age had such a quiet fan. And he goes, but mine's running hot. And I thought, oh man, it's seized up all the way. And sure enough, he took the cover off and it's seized up all the way. So he had the exact same problem. But again, no damage reflected on the outside. It's just scraping as you go around. And something else, I'm putting my hand in here, but you need to be cautious. So something that we learned together, he and I, was that if you look at, we're just going to put this on a ground pin over here with my meter. I want to see if I can get that meter in the shot. I am not doing any sort of production value anything here, people, so it's pretty high. But anyway, so I'm just going to probe a couple places and describe them, and then I'll show you the places, because I can't do both at the same time. So when I turn this on, I've got, let's see, AC volts. Okay, so as you would expect, you're going to find 120, on the wire. Now I'm just connecting to the incoming wire, right? But now I'm going to touch the heat sink that's closest to the fan, 68 volts. And I'm going to touch the other heat sink with the holes in it, which is nothing, which I checked later is continuous with ground. So you've got in this power supply 2 heat sinks, one with 68 volts on it and one that's grounded. And I presume that that's part of the rectifier halfway or something. It's got half of the voltage on it roughly or something. But if you were to get in there and mess with that while the power's on and try to make it go like what he was doing, you need to watch out and not touch these 2 at the same time, because you'll get a little surprised. But that's kind of what I've been doing with the hardware, as far as getting it to where it can function right, and I can start exploring what's inside. So the next thing that I've done, let me just take this out, was I took the ROM and unloaded it into, or disassembled it into a file, and I used an online disassembler. I'm not a Z80 programmer. I am a programmer, but I haven't done Z80 assembly ever, and it's been 30 years since I did x86 assembly. But the wasn't too hard actually to follow. You don't kind of sound like learning how to ride a bicycle, I guess, from that perspective. But anyway, so I dumped the ROM, and then I found an online disassembler to sort of get it into the code base first. But when you do that, every line, and I'll may go over here and show some clips in a minute, but every line is basically going to be having a physical address right from the ROM. So you've got to go in and you've got to replace all of those hard-coded addresses which are in the ROM and put labels on them if you have any intention of taking that code and then starting to make modifications and then rebuilding an image to put back into a ROM, which I've got. For example, I would just take, this is a Atmel 28C64, which is bigger than this is going to look at, but that's fine. And then I've just got the very common EEPROM programmer here. This TL866 that a lot of folks have. Side note, by the way, so I saw that they launched a new one. One of the limitations of this model was that it couldn't do like 21 or 25 volts for older EEPROMs. That's never been a problem for me. I don't have any equipment that has those, but some people do, and they've put out a new version that supports that. So, side note. But yeah, just using an iterative process of, I'll show you the online stuff here in a minute, but using the disassembler initially, editing the file, changing out labels, starting to decipher what things are for, and then I've produced an initial commented assembly code or listing of the production ROM, the 4K ROM, and I used actually an online assembler as well. It's called asm80.com. It's got an assembler, an editor, and even a little emulator so you can step through some code. Although that wasn't too useful because it starts doing lots of ins and outs to set up the hardware, and of course it's not going to get the right responses back. I'm going to stop myself right there. I've covered the main points I wanted to cover. If you want to hear about other aspects as I go along in the project here, let me know in the comments. There's a couple of other topics that might make an interesting video if I get the time. And I'll put a link to a GitHub in the description. There's not a lot, but there's a copy of the ROM assembly code out there that will build the exact ROM that's in the system. And otherwise, my name is Greg Starks, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks.